Exponentially, thank you for joining us. Friday morning, last working day is always difficult to get out. I mean, a lot of things have to be done. हम वैसे ही एक crunch economy के अंदर चल रहे हैं. Everybody is stretched to the limit. So thanks to, of course, the PSTV, Adib, and Hime and all the team for putting this together for us. मैं खाली आपका 1 minute लूँगा and then I will give you the speaker. I'm Mehdi Hassan. I'm a long-term supporter of PSTV and a trainer. I work with Lords Automotive. I'm chief operating there. Another passion of mine is e-commerce, Tofe.com. I'm co-founder, and of course the Hunar Foundation. We are working to skill the economy, and hence we are looking at all the areas ke jahan skills ko develop kiya ja sake. It's very rare that we get a chance to get, you can say, a peek into what's coming into the future. Today's session or talk is about that. Mashhood is as much a Karachiite as he is a Silicon Valley person. Yahi se higher education and some of the Pakistanis that are now based there and doing these new interesting things. He's the subject expert on design thinking. I don't know much about it. I'm here just like all of you to learn about it. Thoda bahut main se kyunki rehta hu Munsarif. Mashhood and myself, we are also members of Open, the organization of Pakistani entrepreneurs. It's a very strong chapter of presence hai. So I leave it to Mashhood to take you into the chapter.
Thank you, Mehdi, and thank you very much for coming in the morning. Again, as Mehdi said, Mashhood Alam. I from DJ and then NAD and then moved to States to do my master's, and then since 2000 I've been in Silicon Valley, primarily on working on innovation. For a long time I was at SAP's innovation lab over there, and working on the latest then products from software development perspective, the product management and solution strategy, innovation, transformation, and for the last 3.5 years, I am heading the platform for world's largest data center and digital interconnection company called Equinix. You may or may not have heard of them, but they're kind of at the substrate level, and all the 95% of network traffic goes through the data centers. And so, throughout the course of my career, I've built products, software, and I have several patents as well. I have worked with design teams, I've led design engagements. I've built my expertise, learned about design thinking and how I've applied. So I'll briefly touch base upon that as well. And our team actually won a couple of design awards as part of that journey too. So I think that's a quick background about myself. So technology background, business kind of background, and the design aspects. And the way I wanted to kind of touch base today is, when I was thinking about what to talk about today is, so I said, okay, the world is exponentially transforming, we all know that, and everybody's asking themselves, how can they stay relevant as individuals as well as businesses? So I said, okay, maybe I'll share my experience, and why that is, I could speak a bit about it because 5 years when I was in SAP, for 5 years, I set up their transformation division within the innovation team, and I worked with more than 50 large organizations, including Fortune 500 companies, in their digital transformation journey. So I know a little bit about how to actually approach digital transformation for organizations, and the approach that I took was quite different than the usual approach. It was more applying design thinking at more strategic C-level topics as well. So that's why I have that experience that I can share briefly today in like 45 minutes, 50 minutes. I will be asking some questions. Hopefully you guys will be more engaged. It should not be just a monologue, but we will have plenty of time after 50 minutes for Q&A and those kind of things, right? So with that, let me just quickly give you a little bit of the context. It's no surprise, the world is changing. And from IoT, cloud-based technologies, from artificial intelligence, you all have mobile devices which performs multiple tasks, etc. And the important part is that it is changing and transforming the business models, the way we do business, the way we interact with our customers, the way we run our businesses. And not only that, actually, technology is becoming better and better at not just repetitive tasks, but more creative tasks, as we have seen over the last 6 months or so, with the advent of ChatGPT through OpenAI, that I can just ask that bloody thing, hey, write me an essay about any topic and in any persona, and it's gonna just spit it out in a pretty darn good way. And so we all are asking ourselves what to do about it, right? So that's something important. Another important aspect is this change is exponential. How many of you have heard Moore's law?
Which one?
Moore's law?
Moore's
Yeah.
law. Murphy's law, I know.
No, Moore's law. So Gordon Moore, the inventor of Intel in 1965, said the computing essentially means that now how many number of transistors you can fit into a wafer, right? And he said that every 18 months you can double the number of transistors for the same cost. That's exponential transformation. You're doubling at a particular period, right? What is happening now is not just that the Moore's law has stayed ground for the last 50 years, it is accelerating. Now this doubling of performance is happening within a few months. वो केबल देख लीजिएगा थोड़ा सा हिल रहा है। वो तो अब the difference is that every few months we are seeing more and more capabilities. Now one more thing I would like to highlight is what happens is in exponential curve, in the beginning, the 7 iterations, you don't see the notice. You see 0.1 to go 0.4, 0.2, 0.4, 0.8, 1.6. You don't see much notice. But as soon as you hit the 8th iteration, the exponential curve just hits that elevation. And whenever that hits, it disrupts. And that disruption is disrupting the businesses, industries, business models, and individuals because their skills are becoming obsolete overnight. Right? So keep that in mind. This is the world we are living in. Right? And if you haven't read his books, please do read Yuval Harari's books. We are fighting against irrelevance. Human beings, because of this cognitive revolution, powered by AI, we will be fighting against irrelevance. And not just the labor, it's the knowledge workers like you and I. So remember that. So that's the context which I want to highlight. So the question becomes, how can we stay relevant as individual and as business? So I'll be talking about that, and that's where I will infuse design thinking, why this is important. Hopefully that will work out for all of you, right, to understand. Because just coming over here and talking about a technical topic or design thinking may be useful, but if I can position it in terms of why this is important, hopefully that will be much more meaningful. So that's my goal today. So today, what I'll do is, first, I'll talk about as a business, because a lot of you are leaders in your businesses as well. I think that will be useful for you. And then at the end, I'll talk about individual, and then I kind of distill how design thinking is important. One of the key, what is the key phenomena that distinguishes a centralized economy versus a free market capitalistic economy? Can anybody guess or tell me what is the main difference between an economy like China? China has now adopted some part of free market economy, but Russia and the historical communists or North Korea and others versus the Western model, USA is leading. What is one of the key phenomena? Any guesses? What distinguishes?
Individual property rights.
Individual property right, okay.
So government control.
Yeah, no, not having government control. But it is creative destruction. Did you hear this term earlier on? What happens is an industry or a company which has been around for decades, even centuries, is disrupted by a newcomer out of nowhere. Can anybody get any examples of that?
It's already there.
Right. All these examples are there, right? 100 years.
Uber and Airbnb are the basics.
Yes. 100-year-old automotive company industry. They did not transform themselves. A startup, Tesla from Palo Alto, changed them. Everybody's now making EVs. Everybody's investing in self-driving cars. Who stopped them before? Nobody. But Amazon, retail was there for 100 years. And then they came and disrupted it, right? So that's the point, that creative destruction. It only is applicable in a free market economy, where there is incentive for you to challenge the status quo and then do that. So that, you got it. What is the key part of it? So I can distill it a little bit further. Any business that you run, or any idea that you have, it follows an S curve. So at this point, you don't know, you're doing a lot of experimentation, right? But then at some point, you find the product market fit. And then you kind of get the funding, and then that scales up. But it does not scale up to perpetuity. At some point, it plateaus because other incumbent competitors come in, or kind of it starts to lose its relevance, and other technology comes in. So what happens at that point? At the pinnacle, there's only two options. You cannot sustain that plateau. You're either going to reinvent yourself, transform yourself, or you're gonna just die. These are some of the examples where these companies successfully reinvented. IBM also did it, GE also did it multiple times, but that does not mean that's the thing. But you can see the graveyard of businesses and industries, right? Who could not do that? Now, if you are at the place where your growth is already slowing, you're already in trouble. It's very difficult. So I think it's relevant for you to think about your business, where your business is in this curve, and be very honest about it. Or if you are joining a company, think about that company, where that company is, right? If you are somewhere here, I think you're good. But if you are somewhere here, you need to like either help transform that company or, I don't know, find another one. But when you are growing, that's where the opportunity is. Do not wait till you hit the plateau. You kind of at the growth part. And even now, I mean, we can see that a really giant like Google is threatened by a very small startup with 150, 200 people, OpenAI, smart dudes, right? So nobody is immune to that. Now, nobody in Pakistan will also be immune to that. Nobody in the Pakistani business, except one category. I'm not gonna well, if Pakistan survives, then I think they'll continue. Anyway, didn't want to have be apolitical about it. So when incumbents see the opportunities, so I work with a lot of companies in their transformation. So I met with executives who were either looking at these three angles. Well, how can I Uberize my business model? How can I have digital platform in my business model? How can I use these technologies for my business, right? So, question to you, where should we be focusing on? Should we be focusing on whether our business model is relevant or not anymore? Should we be focusing on which technology to use? Or should we be focusing on customer experience? What do you guys think?
All three are.
All three of them. Where should we start?
Business model.
Business model? Business model?
Maybe technology.
Technology, customer experience. So let me give you, in the next few slides, I don't like to give you answers. I like to think through and then see whether we can come together to an answer, right? So let's imagine this is a typical company, which is physical goods based, primarily sales led, right? Mostly, and some part is like self-service, some channels there, right? But then the leadership decides that, hey, we need to transform ourselves and we need to transform. And when you're talking about transformation, I think the battery died here. Essentially, they said that, hey, we need to invest in digital part, right? So, but in future, sales then will still continue, but it's going to be like a third of the business. The remaining will be digital focused, right? So here, you can actually look at the how part, using all the new technologies and new techniques, right? But then if you start focusing on who, and first, whether those customers, what is their changing behavioral expectations, or maybe new customer segments will be coming targeting. That's one part. But then you need to transform the organization so there are internal stakeholders like sales, care organization, product organization, IT, ops, and all those kind of organization. Now, you can't just transform a company with technology only. And if you kind of focus on these are two groups, customers/users and stakeholders, internal stakeholders. Now, do you know that both of them are human beings? A lot of times what we do is we become very abstract when we say customers. Well, Nestle is our customer, this company is our customer. But at the end of the day, you don't interact with that customer, you interact with the people in that company. Always remember that. Remember that. And I think I'm gonna show you. So how to really understand the customer's needs. And I think that's where I have a question for you, quickly. What's the best way to go from Karachi to Lahore? Quickly.
Zoom.
Huh?
Zoom.
Zoom.
Take a
Plane.
flight.
Take a flight. Anybody else?
Except PIA.
Now, I'll tell you, let's say I'm working in Karachi, one of you are working in Karachi. You've got an opportunity which pays you double in a much reputed company, and they're willing to pay for relocation of you to Lahore. Then is it flight only? Actually, you need a moving company. You need a real estate broker to help you find a place to rent over there. You need some consultant to help you, your kids get into schools over there. It was the same problem statement, but depending on what the context was, the answer, the solution was totally different. Now imagine, put yourself like 15, 20 years back when you were a student and hard for cash, and you wanted to have fun going to Lahore and stuff like that. You don't have much money, so you're pulling some money together. You probably are better off taking a train ride. Or if you have like a few kids and you want to like have a road trip experience, then you want to like rent a minivan or something like that, right? Same problem is statement, but the solution is totally different because the humans were different, the context was different, and that's where design thinking comes into play. So design thinking, it's a mechanism which focuses on the human needs, understanding who the users are, who the people are that you're solving the problem for. But not only that, it brings the technology aspect, how are you going to solve it, and then what will the business value together. Another aspect of design thinking is, we have been all trained in our schooling, in academia, presented with a well-defined problem statement, and we solve that in a more efficient manner. In real life, as you and I know, problems are not well-defined. What you need to do is you need to search for problems. So design thinking actually helps you find the right problems. I'll give you one short example. So I was working with the state government in the US, and they asked me to come over. I had done some project, and they said, okay, can you come and help solve the procurement execution problem? So I had like a full day design thinking workshop where their business leads and the IT leads and their stakeholders were there. And we kind of laid out on a wall the procurement journey. And what we found out, within an hour or two, the procurement execution takes 1 week out of a 9-month cycle. And I asked them what happens in the 8.5 months. They said the requirements gathering. I said, don't you think that would make sense to simplify the procurement requirements gathering rather than the procurement execution problem? Because if we are able to curtail 10%, here we're talking about curtailing 1 month. Over there, 10% is like a few hours. They said yes. So we switched the focus of the engagement to procurement requirement gathering rather than procurement execution. Finding the right problem, design thinking helps to do that too. So this is kind of, if you search about design thinking, this is going to come up, some version of it. You need to focus on desirability from the human perspective. And then bring the technical prototyping for feasibility aspect to see quickly what works, what doesn't work. There's some seeds over here and there too. And you kind of, in the same time, you look at whether there is a business benefit on the plan. So always remember that. Focus on desirability first, while you continue to iterate on feasibility, and then you kind of bring in. So design thinking brings it all together. So I'll be like a little bit academic over the next few slides, but then we'll come back. So focus, once you have a hunch of a problem, focus, ask the question, who is this problem for? And what is the context? Right? Talk to those people. Talk to those users, validate, rather than kind of push yourself, you ask questions so that you understand whether the problem is right or not, right? And then once you have a somewhat clear idea of what the problem you're trying to solve for whom, you essentially go to the solution space where actually you continue to keep the user in the center, but you iterate your way. And I'll talk about how can you iterate without spending too much of your funds as well. And then at that point, you come to a minimum viable product. Right? So again, in both the problem space as well as solution space, you need to keep the user at the center of it. I tell you so many times, both in enterprises and startups, when we have asked the basic questions, what is the problem you're solving for whom? People are not clear at that point. If you're not clear, how are you supposed to solve the problem? So that's very important. So keep that in mind. So design thinking, a little bit. So design, when you hear the term design, a lot of people can think about how it looks. Actually, it's much more than that. It brings the form and function together. How it looks and feels, but also what is the purpose it's solving. That kind of brings the design aspect. The thinking part is both business and creative. Business is essentially more rational, more analytical. Creative is much more exploratory. Right? That's where you kind of bring it all together, and that's what design thinking is. And more importantly, it probably is a misnomer, it should be design doing, because a lot of focus is on action. You're not theoretically doing this, you are actually involved and building the prototypes. So let me give you a little bit of snapshot. So my team has done many of these design engagements and solving problems. The key part is when you have understood that who the users are, you need to spend time with the users. If you're solving a problem for a truck driver, you need to spend time with the truck drivers. If you're trying to solve a problem for a retail point of sale guy, you need to spend time with them, observing them. Even like experiential, you do it yourself. That's how you build empathy with them. So I think that's very important. When you become business leads, and a lot of you are business leaders, you lose the touch with the end users. I think it's important to keep that in mind, right? You do ride-alongs as well. So as a user, so this was a kind of we were solving problems for nutrition area. So we spent, our team, the research team, actually spent time with users going across when they're doing the grocery shopping, looking at the ingredients, even going into their homes to try to see how they're actually using those ingredients. Just to give you some example. You bring a lot of those insights from the field. And by the way, a lot of engineering background like we are not trained to do that. A lot of people in psychology, anthropology, I think those are the folks who are really trained in, have a seat over here. They are trained to actually do this, to really understand the needs, because a lot of times users are unable to articulate their needs, so you need to really peel the onion to understand what their challenges are. But you bring all those together, and obviously you can see that it does require some structured mechanism, otherwise it will be chaos. But you start seeing the theme across different user research aspects. And then you bring kind of an ideation. And ideation, it does not, a lot of times what we do is prototyping and ideation, we think that, hey, we need to bring our developers, we need to code it. No, you can just start putting your pen on the paper and kind of writing. This is a workshop that I did in which some of the initial prototypes were actually built right in the workshop. So this is how it's going to be, right? And multidisciplinary part. So when you are working in an environment in which there are different stakeholders involved, which pretty much is everywhere, right? Whether it's sales, operations, design, you cannot drive your ideas forward in an enterprise unless everybody's on board. So you need to bring their perspectives together, make them allies, right? And then when you kind of share with them, this is what our research team has done, this is what our customers are facing, the challenges, and then you kind of structurally ideate together with them, then the solution that you go towards is a joint solution, not just you are thrusting on them. So I think that's where I think the art of facilitation really helps it. This was rapid prototyping that started in the workshop itself. And it does not require any high-tech equipment. You just have a piece of paper. And this is the first, and this was essentially a city, the state government. And it was a big data issue that they have a lot of data, but they didn't know how to make that data available in a meaningful manner to their citizenry. So in the workshop, we had professors, we had business owners, we had journalists, we had several people who would be the consumers of those data. And then this was one of the prototype ideas they built. We iterated over it, and that actually won a design award afterwards. That was the first sketch of that. So it's very important. And here I think you can see, and I'll talk about the creativity part, there is no inhibition over here. You're sitting on a floor and there is no formality. The focus is about solving the problem and not really anything else. And it's an iterative design. So once you have, you can like lay out the stories that, hey, this is how the experience is going to look like. Bring the users, this is one of the users, into the room and then walk them through. At this point, we have not spent any technical skills. We have just kind of worked on the ideas. I focused on the problem, finding out whether we are solving the right problem. Once we have done that, then we have iterated our way just on ideation phase and how that solution might look like. Might be using mobile, might be using a desktop, might not be using any of that, right? But then you just walk through that journey with the users before you have written a single line of code, right? And then you get feedback. Now at that point when you are, and there are like storytelling part, there are different techniques that you can use. But then at that point you start kind of codifying it. You again iterate the initial versions. If it's a mobile app, you with the users, make them initial testers. And then you actually come to build an experience for them which actually solves their problems, makes them feel good, right? And then at that point, you know that this is solving the right problem because the users are involved throughout the design process. So again, just to summarize, finding the right problem first, from the perspective of the user. Who is that user? What is the context in which the user is operating? Bringing multi-disciplinary teams together for solution ideas. Prototyping those ideas and getting feedback from the users as you kind of increase the fidelity of that and then make it technically solution, right? Now, the other part which I did not mention is, obviously you'll be working with your technologists to see whether it's technically feasible. You'll be working with your business stakeholders to see whether there is business value out of it. And it all comes together, desirability, feasibility, and viability. So you need to make sure those stakeholders are part of the cycle. That's where magic happens. But you must be asking, so what? I mean, this looks pretty fancy, right? Show me the money. Must be asking that question. Let me show you the money. By not me, but McKinsey, what McKinsey says, right? So McKinsey, they have, you can search it up online, go in detail. So you just search the business value of design by McKinsey, you should be able to download this report. So what they did was, McKinsey being McKinsey, they spent 5 years with 300 companies, with more than 100K design touch points and 2 million financial data points they collected. And they wanted to see the companies which are in the top quartile of design, McKinsey's Design Management Index, how are they performing from revenue perspective and return to shareholders? These are the two best metrics for a company, right? What is it? Let me show you this. Companies which were in the top quartile in design were 2 times more profitable, more revenue compared to their peers, and 2 times the return to their stakeholders from their stock market valuation. So design has tangible dollar impact. So that's, I want you to remember that. Because now I think we went through that phase in 2000, from 2005 to 2015-16 timeframe, where HBR and all the kind of the leaders talked about design thinking. Now it's become part of the Western companies. They kind of use it, infuse in their product development cycle, in the way they run it. So I think here it might be new, but actually it's now infused. So now you used to have chief design officers. Now it's part of, you may not see that, but you have that. So it has tangible business value. Any questions on that before we move to the next part, which is so remember, we were talking about how to stay relevant as a business, and the previous section was about understanding the needs of the customers. Now I'll spend like a few minutes on the understanding how to really influence the internal stakeholders too. But before I do that, I just want to see if there's any questions around how design thinking, the application to how do we understand the needs of customers. Any quick questions, any thoughts?
Are there any theoretical frameworks that you keep in your mind as you're going through the entire process? Are there different models at different steps that you rely on
Yes.
in terms of like taking?
Good question, because I actually, as part of my experience, I wrote a book about it.
Oh, nice.
And I brought a couple of copies over here too. And that framework you can follow step by step with templates. It's a very thin kind of thing. It's not a theoretical book, but it gives you some guide in terms of how to orchestrate these workshops as well, and each of the steps. What are the steps for? So that is available. It's available on Amazon and everywhere, kind of thing. And then obviously there are other authors who have written that, but this is something which I apply my knowledge into and experience into just codifying that. Okay, cool. So quickly, I think this probably a lot of the senior folks will resonate with it. Is most of you are somewhere over here. I think some maybe earlier on in the career, but essentially you have some teams that you are running. You're reporting to a boss who reports to executive, or maybe you are an executive too. But if you want to, you obviously want to align with the leadership. You want to set the purpose and an exciting vision and clarity for your team. That is not sufficient. Now imagine if you have an idea, you're somewhere over here, middle management, and you want to transform. You see that hey, our business needs to transform. How will you actually go about doing that? Because it's not just your team, there are other teams like this. So you might be the technology part, maybe in the product team, maybe in the ops, but there are others around as well. So what you need to do is, and these folks have institutional knowledge, you need to kind of bring them on board with joint objectives and co-design part. How do you actually do that? It's through empathy, understanding their needs, right? Active listening, getting feedback, and earning their trust. This all comes down to emotional intelligence. You cannot rise above certain level if you have not honed that piece, right? And I'll have some stats about it very soon as well. So that's how you will. So on the first hand, you need to understand. And by the way, to gain the trust of internal stakeholders, bringing the voice of the customer is the best way to do that. Tell, hey, we did talk to 10 customers, 10 users. Our team actually collected all this information. Don't just rely on the surveys. Surveys do not get. You spend the time that, hey, this is what the challenges are, and we need to fix that. It has implications on operations, it has implications on others, and one thing. And this makes sense. And I want you to be part of that. And then when you have this cross-functional workshops, you invite them, the key folks, and then they will co-own it. So that was like talk about how to stay relevant as a business, right? I mean, these parts are very important. So I did not really touch base on technology and business model because see, if you are able to articulate a future vision from the customer experience perspective, then you see which technology makes sense, which business model makes sense, right? If you just go with business model, you're just kind of, it's a hunch. Which technology? Doesn't matter. It's not, I mean, your goal is to solve your customers' problems, and then while you make money, right? And make sure that your employees are happy. So I think focusing on customer experience is so important. That's where design thinking comes into play. And then getting that alignment internally with emotional intelligence, I think that's very important. And then you look at which technology and which business model makes sense. Got it?
Yeah.
Now, I think the next few items is, and this is more, when I was giving this talk earlier this year to executive MBA students as well, also did to some of the other universities as well. The important part is, and it's applicable to everyone. So over the course of my career, I kind of thought that what else with AI, large language models, threatening knowledge workers and everyone pretty much, how can we stay relevant? So this is my perspective, take it as you see fit. But this is what I'm going to talk about. But before I do that, quick question. What percentage of your success do you think it depends on your technical capabilities? A, 70%, B, 45%, C, 15%. Again, the question is, what percentage of your success depends on your technical capabilities? Raise your hands if you think it's 70%. Raise your hands if you think it's 45%. Raise your hand if you think it's 15%. Actually, yeah, that's pretty good. This was a study conducted by Harvard, and then they actually saw that only 15% of the success. It is necessary. You can't skip it. You need to have the technical capabilities. But to succeed, you need to have what we call human or character skills. Now, for that, my perspective, there are numerous people who have written much more qualified than me, But based on my experience, I think it falls into three different areas. Now in the next section, you will learn something about you which will delight you. I'm just warning you. First is growth mindset. So this psychologist from Stanford, Carol Dweck, I would encourage you to read her book, Mindset. She actually did a study with kids and others as well, and then see how growth mindset versus fixed mindset impacts your ability to be more effective. So I'll give you kind of key things. So what she did was she invited fifth grade students, divided them into two groups, gave them a normal fifth grade math exam. When they brought back the results, for one group, she said, "You've done well, you must be very smart." Other group, she said, "You've done well, you must have worked really hard." What she found out that when later on she gave 8th grade exams to the same kids, the first group, whose intelligence was appreciated, they were the first ones to quit. And they always were giving blame on others. Other group, whose hardworking abilities were appreciated, they actually continued to strive through that, and they performed better. They solved even some of those problems as well, and they took ownership. The key difference is the first group, whose intelligence was appreciated. Intelligence is kind of linked as innate ability. Either you have it or you're not. So they said, well, I don't want to challenge myself because that's kind of the core of me. The other one was more about growth mindset. I can put more hard work and I can succeed. And actually that is something which is very important. And there is another psychologist from Stanford whose TED Talk, you can search it up. She actually proved that by having a growth mindset, different mindset, it has a physical impact on your physiology as well. And she kind of had the blood pressure checking and others like that. So the core principle of growth mindset is that you go from, you're always looking to learn and improve, and you believe that I can improve in every aspect, technical skills as well as human skills. Now, why do I have this know it all and to learn it all? Can anybody guess?
Knowing is not enough.
You have to keep on increasing your knowledge, and you can learn every time you want. Knowing is just like the current status you want.
Yes. One reason is staying relevant. He's staying relevant. But if you read the book from Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, Hit Refresh, that's the book name. When he transformed, he's probably the most successful CEO of the history of business, perhaps one of the top. He transformed Microsoft because Microsoft had a know-it-all culture. Within their units, everybody was a smartass. But he changed that to a learn-it-all culture. That was the underpinning of Microsoft's success. So read that book if you have time. And I think that's a key part. Always remember that you can improve every aspect of yourself. Now, the second part of creative confidence, I'm going to spend a little bit more time because that's what innovation is about, design thinking and all that fun. Key points, you're all born creative geniuses, and I'll prove you that. And our imaginations have no limits, so don't think about the current challenges, and of course do that. And then share our ideas without the fear of ridicule. Quick question. And we all know that innovation relies on creativity, but how do you define innovation?
Insights.
Sorry?
Insights.
Insights?
Something which is not available. And
Something which is new, not available.
business needs.
Business needs. I'll give you a very simple equation. I'm an engineer. I'll give you some simple equation. Innovation is creativity times execution. That's it. Very simple. You will never forget that, hopefully. Right? So what is execution? We have all been taught about execution, right? Problem solving. You solve the problem, you scale it, right? And which results in incremental innovations, right? But the important part is creativity, finding the right problem to solve. That's where you can't find it unless you go look out for those problems, validated from the target users, right? And that's where I think breakthrough innovations come into play. Raise your hands if you think you are creative. Keep your hands raised. Okay, that's good. About 70%.
All Pakistanis are.
All right? Okay. No, okay. Keep your hands raised. Keep your hands raised if you think you are more creative than a 5-year-old.
That's we are not sure.
No.
Okay, maybe 1 or 2 still remain. Awesome. I love that. Why? What happened?
I forget to praise my.
Yeah. What happened?
The energy they have, I think.
They don't have the limits.
They don't have limits. Imagination. They
Imagination,
don't.
yeah.
Talent. Let me tell you some. They are
They
fearless, right? They're not in. They are unencumbered from our knowledge. Right? Now let me give you some. I'm an engineer from trade, so I'll give you some stats, some data. So this is the guy George Land, no more, American psychologist, and you can see the trend. I talk about a lot of psychology because behavioral science is very important. I like that. He was asked by NASA in the 1960s, generate a test, creativity assessment test. We need to find the most creative engineers in NASA for some special projects. So he did that. You might have come across, like there are like 4 pictures, and then you need to predict the 5th one, right? Something like that. So he was the inventor for it. What he did was he said, okay, why don't I do this one thing? And NASA kind of used that. He said, why don't I give it to 5-year-old? Can anybody guess what percentage of 5-year-old kids came under creative genius category, which is the highest level of creativity? Any guesses? What percentage of kids were in creative genius category?
95%.
95? 90, 70? 85? 100? Yeah, somewhere close. 98%.
Wow.
Okay? Now, wait. He gave the same test to the same kids when they were 10 years old. Same kids, same test to 10 years old. Can anybody guess what percentage remained in creative genius? 75? 60?
45?
45? 50? Some people are really pessimistic here. 30%.
Oh.
What happens between 5-year-old and 10-year-old? What happens? Primary school happens.
Primary.
Imagination.
No, day schooling.
Primary school, right?
Yeah.
1 to 5th grade, right? Cramming. रट्टा मारो इसको. Right? ये तुम्हारे टेस्ट में आएगा. You do it right or wrong. Right or wrong. Pass or fail. Pass or fail. Right? Imagine 98% drop to 30% within 5 years. I mean, those who have younger kids, think about it, how you want to raise them. Right? My kids are already old, so. He did not stop there. He gave the same test to the same kids when they were 15 years old. Now, at this point, most of the guesses are pretty right, but can you guess on what percentage came under creative genius category? 10? 40? Somebody said that it increased? Okay. 5? Okay. It's actually 12%. Almost right. Now, he did that. What he did was, he said, okay, why don't I give to a sample of adult population in US? Any guesses? What percentage of adults? 5? US? 3? 3? 2? He's right. I want you to look at that. Internalize it. A population which was creative genius when they were born. They lost pretty much all of their creativity when they were adult.
So we are all out from the creative list.
We educate ourselves out of creativity. Guess what will be most important in future? Because all the skills, technical part and others, it will be automated. What will remain is your ability to work with others, be more creative, challenge assumptions in others. Right? But do remember, you all are creative geniuses. You just need to discover your creative genius. Right? So, how can we rediscover? So I'll give you some tips. Some tips. Hopefully you will use some of these techniques to improve your creativity.
Don't sit with the adults.
Huh?
Don't sit with the adults.
Vedima, you missed the very important stats I shared.
Having more kids or stay with the.
So,
5-year-old.
I'll give you some techniques which are practical, you can apply in your daily life, right? First thing is, there is a concept in design thinking called divergent thinking, and then convergent thinking. So remember, going back to design thinking, there is a problem space and then there is a solution space. Before you start solving a problem, which we have a tendency to, see whether the right problem is being solved, right? You can apply this divergent thinking and create convergent thinking. You say, okay, we're not going to solve the problem right now. Let's explore whether we are solving the right problems. And in this 30-minute meeting, we are just going to explore whether we're solving the right problem. We're not going to start solving it. And generate as many ideas. I kid you not, if you give a problem statement to an audience like this, and you ask them to write down what is the problem you're trying to solve, you will find 15 different variations of the problem to be solved. What we are trying to do is create choices over there. Okay, these are all the ways the problem where we understand that we are solving. You just kind of divide that, have two meetings. Instead of one meeting of problem, you kind of enrich, you generate ideas of what problem you're solving. Come back next day and then start conversion thinking, where you're narrowing down, okay, this is the right problem. And then you can validate it to the users. You should apply the same thing for the solution space. First, generate tons of ideas, all the way from pragmatic to wacky, crazy ideas. At that point, nobody is evaluating the ideas. You're just generating tons of ideas. And we have techniques that kind of I use in my boot camps, in which we are able to generate more than 200 ideas within the span of 20 minutes. At that point, we're not evaluating. But then next day we come in, everybody has a chance to simmer through those ideas, and then we start our pragmatic approach. This is the creative side, and this is the business side. Remember that design thinking part, the thinking part? That's where it comes together. So one way to improve your creative potential is separate problem space from solution space, and within problem and solution space, have two meetings. One to generate choices with divergent thinking. The other one is another meeting for conversion. You will see the quality of your ideas and focusing on the right problems will improve drastically. Okay, that's one technique. Remember this, divergent thinking versus convergent thinking. And applying this to both problem space as well as solution space. Got it? Another technique. You either win or you learn. You don't fail. You guys know what WD-40 is? Do you know the story behind it? Why is that 40? So these were, I think, NASA engineers who thought that I think we can combine chemicals to create a lubricant which does not have the greasy feel but still provides that kind of flexibility. So what they did was, this is the 40th experiment they did. Imagine if they had stopped at 39th, this product would not have come.
The most wonderful product.
Right? So they won after 40 attempts. They were learning in that experimentation. So whenever you are experimenting any idea, think about it. Your first idea, your 10th idea is never going to be the right one. But maybe the 30th one will be the right one. Maybe the 50th will be the right one. As you iterate over it, but you are continuously learning. How are you learning? This was a technical solution, but when you are working with the users, you get feedback in every iteration. Right? Challenge the status quo. These are some couple of examples who challenge the status quo. Traditional wisdom was never invite a stranger to your house, never give a ride to a stranger. Well, that holds true in Karachi anyways. But they built companies which are worth more than $50 billion. They disrupted hotel business and taxi business and others, right?
Ask us.
It's no shame to be dumb. I've asked in C-level executives of Fortune 500 companies, I asked basic questions about their business. And I got 5 different answers from the executives. And I did not have to say anything. They realized that they were not aligned. But you need to do it in a manner which does not threaten them. It's a safe environment. That requires emotional intelligence to really build that environment, right? But yeah, and also here, in our typical culture, we ask questions when we want to challenge the other person. Here it's not about challenging, it's about understanding. Right? And discovery, more about that. I think you will see. Perfection is the enemy of good. So keep progressing, keep improving. Keep improving that part, right? That's why you get iOS updates or Android updates, right? If they wait for perfection, they will never ship the product. So you need to do that, right? Always remember that. Now this is interesting. This is borrowed from improv. Improv is more on the theater kind of performance. Actors come in, they don't have any script, they kind of say, and then the other person say in front, and they kind of build that improv. That's improv theater. So this technique is leveraged from improv theater. Just notice next time you go to a corporate meeting, a lot of times people say, but, oh, we have done that in the past, right? No, but. So what I do is, we are crunched for time, otherwise I would have done this exercise here. But in the boot camp that I'll plan, maybe we'll do that. Instead of, in your vocabulary, remove no and but, and replace it with yes and. Psychologically, what happens is that when you say no and but, that means you said, okay, your idea is bad. But if you say yes and, I acknowledge your idea, and have you thought about that part? So what happens is that you actually encourage more collaboration. Rather than you are kind of, everybody has a mental block in front of you because you've already threatened them. No, but. So always, when you are in any meeting saying no or but, replace it with yes and. You will see the difference. These are some techniques which will help you become more creative. So again, we talked about growth mindset, we talked about creative confidence, right? And the final part is the storytelling, right? Probably you already know it, I don't have to say that. Important part is to sell as human. I'm selling you some fun ideas over here, right? PSTD sold you that this event is happening over here, right? Come in. You are selling that you are a great employee to your prospective employer. You are selling to your customers. You are selling to your spouse, right? Don't spend too much. Whatever it is, right? And leadership is about influence. Influence is about storytelling. And I think you can read a lot of that. The fundamental problem with today's modern economic is that whoever has studied economics over here, the basic assumption is that we are homo economicus, that if we are presented with the right amount of data, we will make rational choices, we will maximize utility, and we are self-interested human beings. What behavioral science over the last 3 to 4 decades have proven, which we already intuitively knew, that we are not homo economicus. We make irrational decisions. We are influenced by emotions and biases. We are social and empathic people. Right? So, what happens is, and this is the metaphor of a rider on an elephant. Elephant is your emotional brain. And the rider is your rational brain. And if you don't use your rational brain, your emotional brain will take you wherever it wants to. Remember this. We don't make rational decisions. We rationalize our decisions, which are taken at a subconscious level through our emotions. So, essentially, when you want to touch and have and influence anybody to take any decisions, you need to touch them at the emotional level. Obviously, you can have supporting facts and data, but they do not matter if you are able to touch them emotionally. Whether you are influencing a colleague, or a customer, or a boss, anyone, or a spouse, or your kids, you need to touch them at an emotional level. That's where the power of storytelling comes in. Why are we touched with the stories? That somebody tells you a story and you start crying. You start watching a film and you start crying, right? Or you get excited. What are these? These are stories. So, the good thing is, all of these things, design thinking helps in all of this. In your growth mindset, your creative confidence, and your storytelling. That's what it is. What I've done is I've used design thinking not just on the user experience, but on digital transformation of Fortune 500 companies, startup strategy, joint go-to-market strategy between partnerships, sales and account strategy, data analytics strategy. You can apply it in many different ways, right? So this is the book that I had written, captured that. I have a couple of copies over here too. But this is where I kind of captured, I called it Transform 3+1 framework. Essentially, you've already kind of gotten the gist of it, but I'll kind of quickly walk you through that. Any idea, focus on desirability, then feasibility, then viability, and then managing the risk part. So I kind of codified that into steps, as you were like somebody was asking in the back. So these are like steps, what you can do to really understand the desirability part. Then how can you have the prototyping and feasibility part, and then how can you craft a business? So I have like a business model framework as well that you can use, and then a quick framework about managing the risk part. So you all have had hundreds of ideas, I'm guaranteed, over the last few years. But how can you see which idea has potential? Right? Nothing. So I think that's a framework that I've kind of codified in that book, and this is something you can't learn until you do it. Just like swimming or cycling. You can read 10 books on swimming, but you will only learn when you jump in water. Right? So this is the same thing. You need to like practice it. So what I'm trying to do is, we are planning to see whether we can bring a couple of 2 days innovation boot camp in next year to Karachi. And we'll see whether it works out. In that work, it will be an immersive boot camp. If it happens, we'll see. You will actually walk through all those steps for some problem, whether if you have a problem or fictitious problems, and you will learn how it feels like to be in a creative environment, to bring different perspectives together, to explore the idea, the problem space first, prototype the solution space, and then get that kind of your hands dirty in that. That's something that we're kind of looking at.
Only hands will get dirty, right?
Depends on the mind. So yeah, that's it for me. You can check out my website. I write from time to time some blogs. But I would love to kind of see if there are any questions.
Yes, I've got one question. If
Yes.
you go back to that Venn diagram of feasibility and viability. Yeah. And I would like you to help me connect the statement that you made that we make emotional decisions and we try to rationalize them.
Yeah.
How can you connect that to this?
Desirability is all about understanding what are the emotional needs and the practical needs you're solving. And not only that aspect, the other aspect is when you are brainstorming, bringing your stakeholders together, you are touching them emotionally as well. They are part of the process of generating new ideas. So that it's not just your idea, it's a collective idea. It's very then easier to sell inside the organization. Any other questions? I can't be that clear.
So, Mashhood, probably the question is coming in the applicability of not only this, but many of these new thought processes or ideas into our economy here, right? So, on the onset, we think that, hey, we are not digitized enough, we are still, in that industrial 2.0 or maybe 3.0. So how do you see the relevance of not only design thinking, but some of the other ideas that you mentioned? Do you see it happening here soon? Do you think we are already there, we just don't realize it? And this is just a question.
I think a lot of these things are not revolutionary. Since Adam, businesses have been done. And any entrepreneur who runs a new business follows the same thing. It's just like codified in 1990s and 2000s by David and Tom Kelly of Stanford and others into this framework, right? And it's becoming more important because things are changing very rapidly and software is the main driver for change as well. So it's very more applicable over here because it solves the local needs. Right? So you don't need to have a very fancy, like Kareem is a great example, very good success. Mikey is a great example. Dukan, there are so many bazaar, so many examples over here who actually they apply similar principles to really solve local problems. There is so much opportunity over here if you look at digital payment opportunities and others. So it's just, you need to like look at the users, like who are you trying to solve for? And all those people are available over here. Now you need to see their context. What is their, when you are trying to solve a problem, how would they know about this solution? How would they gain access to it, right? What is the localization aspect of it? Those kind of things, but you can experiment with ways. The good thing over here is that you will have readily available users to research in your design cycle. So I think it's very much applicable, and I think this is, I think, probably the only way Pakistan can get out of the mess that we are in. We can't really handle all of these challenges at the policy level and all the structural level, but at least on the private level, we can like solve these problems. And if somebody is here from government, we can solve the problems for citizens, right? Build their experiences so that they don't have to go stand 2 hours in front of a government office to get their thing done. Digitize a lot of those things and have them done. There's tremendous opportunities everywhere. So it's applicable. And we are actually doing, a lot of people are doing it today.
The desirability issue is the key in our government.
Yeah, I mean, just focus on, okay, who is the problem you're trying to solve and what is the context? I mean, a lot of times technologists kind of tend towards like technical solutions, they enjoy that. Business folks are looking at numbers. But then if you don't address the customer needs, you won't have either.
So before the session, just kind of quickly went through your LinkedIn, and you have this description of sort of like setting up cross-functional departments and getting organizations together, and then you also mentioned about manufacturers. What I sort of wanted to understand was that how do you sort of create that organizational inertia, departmental inertia, where you have divergent goals, but you all come together and coalesce around that one single goal that you.
I think that you're talking about transforming an organization. I did not have those parts of it touched in this one, but it's a cultural transformation at the end of the day, and the executive leadership has to have the buy-in. Without that, I've seen time and again it does not work. When you are trying to do it in the department level, or you're trying to do it at the middle management level, it just gets shot down. So you need to figure out a way to influence your executive leadership, and then it becomes an agenda for them. I think the best way I've seen that happen is when you bring the voice of the end customers. When the end customers are facing challenges, or you find new opportunities, you bring those perspectives and hey, the customers are asking for new, better experiences because they're facing these challenges, and if we don't solve them, they're going to turn to our competitors. That creates a sense of urgency.
Right.
Can you please speak up a little?
Since you work in Silicon Valley, you must have worked with many Indian counterparts. So, what is the difference that you find in Indian executives?
Let me stop the recording first.